Welcome back to ASBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Usually, when you see Elliot and I on a video together, we're previewing a fight, but we are not in preview mode today. We're in review mode today. We're, of course, talking about last night's fight between Britain's John Ryder and Mexico's Jaime Munguia. Jaime Munguia extending his unbeaten record to 43-0 with a ninth round knockout of John Ryder. He knocked him down three times before the ending came in the ninth round. And yeah, Elliot and I are on hand to jump onto a review here, seeing what's potentially next for Jaime Munguia, who we want to see him fight, and how he potentially fares against the best fighters at super middleweight. Elliot, thanks very much for joining me, mate. Just before we get into what's next and who we want to see him fight and how he fares, what did you make of Jaime Munguia's performance last night against John Ryder?
Oh, very good, interesting question. Thank you very much, Paul, obviously, for that eloquent introduction. I think, you know what, it was a good performance. Obviously, he did what he had to do. Obviously, stopped the man in front of him, battered him, frankly. But I was actually, to be honest with you, probably more disappointed with John Ryder's performance than I was with Munguia's performance. Um, I mean, he looked all right. He looked good. Obviously, landed a lot of power shots, but I thought Ryder was just far from it, mate. To be honest with you, he really was. I thought like I think we were talking about WhatsApp beforehand, but I thought his distance was well out. Seemed to just sit in range and take far too many shots. Didn't necessarily have the hand speed, like that right hook didn't really land very often. Didn't really seem to offer much coming back. So yeah, I think for John Ryder, I've loved John Ryder, been a big fan of John Ryder, but I think last night was probably the end, to be quite honest with you, when it comes to John Ryder. But you know what, Munguia, he showed heavy hands, hit him a few times, showed resilience. But when we come, I suppose when we're talking about who is the upper names, topper names at that division, we'll come to how we think we'll fare. But I was. Yeah, I was more saddened, I think, by John Ryder. I thought he got him obviously a great time in gear. Like, he battered him, frankly, didn't he? Didn't look in any real problem. Got him at a good time and stopped him. But I wasn't overly impressed by him either, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, mate. I think for me, I didn't expect Jaime Munguia to stop John Ryder. You're sitting thinking if Canelo can't stop you, then is Jaime Munguia going to be able to stop you? And he kind of proved those doubters wrong. So there's obviously a narrative now. If you're a Jaime Munguia fan, you're saying, well, we stopped John Ryder and Canelo couldn't do it. But then I think there was a very different John Ryder on both occasions. Think that without saying that he's got old overnight, I don't want to say that and be a big critic. He was a massive underdog here. But I think that when you compare John Ryder's performance against Canelo, even though he lost the majority of the rounds, I think he kind of looks like he might have got the stuffing taken out of him by Canelo. And then he was there for the taking, unfortunately, I think, for Munguia. In saying that, he had his own little bits of success. I think Munguia's defense maybe isn't as sound as you would like if he was going to fight one of these elite guys that we're going to talk about next. But yeah, mate, yeah, he's ticked all the boxes there on paper. He's 43-0 now, with what, 30 something knockouts, 34 knockouts or whatever it is. So yeah, clearly a big puncher. And yeah, you know what? Probably is a problem now at super middleweight, 168 pounds for a lot of the best guys. We may as well get straight into it, mate. I mentioned Canelo there and kind of comparing the performances of the two against John Ryder. So we may as well start there. Canelo, widely regarded as the single best super middleweight on the planet. An all Mexico affair against Jaime Munguia. How does that one go, mate?
That one for me. Well, I think, yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, obviously, Munguia, like, there's a bit of a problem. He looked quite, at the times, he looked quite rangy yesterday. Like, obviously, kept Ryder at bay. But I think, to be honest with you, Canelo will chop him down. I think, like, Munguia doesn't necessarily have the speed of footwork. It doesn't necessarily have the movement that I think would trouble someone like Canelo. I think he stands, to be honest with you, too close. He obviously stands there like this quite a lot and like looks to sort of engage. I think that's absolutely ideal for someone like Canelo. I think Canelo will just work his body over. And I don't think Canelo will stand there. And the way that John Ryder stood there, he'll obviously be able to move. And obviously, he's a very, very good counter puncher, Canelo. So I think when Munguia does that, I don't think Munguia's got the hand speed to really trouble him in that way either. I think Canelo, frankly, will just see him coming and either, if they go up close, work him over with that left hook to the body. If he comes at maybe a bit of a distance, I think he'll have it easily enough in his current condition, despite obviously having a lot of miles on the clock, to essentially ride those bigger punches and then just fire back. So I actually think Canelo will chop him down. I can actually see Canelo stopping him late, to be perfectly honest with you, somewhere between 9 and 12. Yeah, I don't think he's got enough to trouble Canelo. I really don't, unless Canelo has similarly aged badly. We've talked obviously you and I have previously about Canelo potentially being like on the slight decline from where he used to be. that miles on the clock sort of thing. But yeah, from what we've seen, what obviously we've seen recently with Canelo, obviously the Charlo fight, Ryder beforehand, far too much from Munguia in my opinion.
Yeah, I concur entirely, mate. I think that I would maybe go a wee bit earlier, but I think the writing would be on the wall for Jaime Munguia from early on. I think he's not defensively sound enough to deal with Canelo. Canelo's shot selection and pressure, I think, and his defense would equally bamboozle Jaime Munguia. If I'm quite honest, I would be very surprised if he didn't stop Jaime Munguia. Yeah, like you say, unless we get a Canelo in there and he looks really old overnight, but I don't think that would be the case. I still think even a 70% Canelo would probably still beat Jaime Munguia, in my opinion. So yeah, I would go a knockout, mate. Second half of the fight, probably similar to what you said. Maybe the tad earlier, a few rounds earlier, maybe go 7 to 9, right, kind of around that range. But yeah, I think the writing would be on the wall early on for Jaime Munguia. What about one of the other 168 pound, well, greats at the minute? A lot of people are talking about David Benavidez being the next man to dominate the division, potentially fighting Canelo next. Everyone wants to see that, but it maybe looks unlikely with Canelo fighting the other Charlo. So say that is happening. Benavidez Munguia next. How does that one go?
No, mate, that is an absolute slaying in my mind. Frankly, Benavidez, big KO. I actually think more dominant than I think Canelo would be. I think obviously we saw Benavidez versus Andrade recently. Andrade's obviously got fast hands, similar in some ways. Obviously coming from middleweight as Munguia has also kind of come up through those weights as well. But I just think honestly, having seen sort of Benavidez, I mean, obviously the UD with Plant, but seeing him obviously against David Lemieux, seeing him against Andrade, I think he's far too much for Munguia. Frankly, I think he just again, we talk about being defensively sound, but I think he's obviously got the durability. Benavidez, the amount of volume that he would throw at him as well, and the sort of pressure that he'd put him under. I don't think Munguia. Obviously, he's got power. Let's not talk about it. He has got power, but I don't think he's necessarily got the speed or the movement to essentially execute that against someone like Benavidez. I think Benavidez would stop him. I think it'd be somewhere. I actually would go somewhere in the first half of the fight potentially, somewhere around like round 6. But obviously, I genuinely reckon he'd absolutely overwhelm him. So yeah, out of the names we're probably going to mention today, I think that's the one where I'd be least looking to take if I was Munguia. But equally, even if I'm Canelo, I don't want any piece of Benavidez either.
Yeah, mate, I think he's completely. I agree with what you said. I think me and you are probably both in agreement that despite not being regarded as the number one with the belts or whatever, I think that I think you and I both have Benavidez as the best super middleweight in the world, and time will tell if we are right. I think he irons out Jaime Munguia as well. I think you talk about Jaime Munguia having this massive record and lots of power, and lots of knockouts. Benavidez equally stunning knockout ratio, and I think he's just got a bit more boxing ability and IQ about him as well. A lot bigger than Jaime Munguia. Both still obviously relatively young. I know Munguia is only 27, so like if he was to fight Benavidez next and he lost, there's no shame and no disgrace in that. He can definitely come again. Um, but yeah, I completely agree with David Benavidez would spark Jaime Munguia out, in my opinion. One name that you mentioned there, who David Benavidez beat on points, Canelo has also beaten, is a man called Caleb Plant. Obviously, that I think I thought Caleb Plant would maybe cause David Benavidez problems, but he didn't really play out that way. But still hanging about there in the upper echelons of the super middleweight division. How do you think a fight with him and Jaime Munguia goes?
You know what? This is actually a close fight in my mind. It's actually quite hard to predict, given that Caleb Plant, like you say, has been in with those names. Not necessarily a massive puncher either. 13 KOs in 22, so not necessarily that. But obviously, he stopped to run, obviously, didn't he? But like you say, losses to Canelo and Benavidez, win over Caleb Trail. So obviously, like he's got pedigree. And I think, to be honest with you, this would actually be the fight that I'd like to see maybe Munguia in next, someone like this, to really see where he is. I think this would be a really good matchup. Uh, I think it'd go points, frankly. Either way, I don't think either man would stop the other one. I'd be surprised if Munguia. I mean, look, we said Munguia's got power, but I'd be surprised still if he stopped Caleb Plant. Frankly, given as well that Plant has gone the distance for someone like Benavidez, who obviously carries, in my mind, a lot more of a threat. So I still think he's got enough. He's only 31, so I still think it would go points. But to be honest with you, I may. It's a real 50-50 for me, Paul. It really is, just because I think Munguia would throw like volume. I think again, neither of them are that fast, hand speed wise either. Obviously, both durable. Munguia arguably has got slightly better movement, so maybe I could see him potentially. getting a points victory. But I mean, it really is a sort of 55-45 sort of fight either way for me. It's not easy to call at all. How about, I mean, I'm not trying to fence it now. I'm just genuinely sort of struggling to see which one I'm leaning. How are you seeing that one?
It's funny because like I think of the names we're mentioning, I give Munguia the most chance against Caleb Plant 100%. Well, I still think I really rate Caleb Plant. I think he is a world class fighter. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really interesting fight. And do you know what? The more we're talking about it, I do want to see that next. Potentially, I think that is a great measuring stick to see where Jaime Munguia is at. If he fights Caleb Plant, and then all of a sudden stops him or beats him relatively comfortably on points, then you're like, okay, oh shit, yeah, he is actually good. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So it's a fight I'd like to see, but I'm similar to you, mate. Getting splinters on that one. Sitting on the fence like yourself. One final one, and I just really want to quickly mention this man. He's lesser known, but he's a frightening puncher. He's undefeated. He's the WBA regular world champion, I believe. David Morrell. How does that one go against Jaime Munguia? And tell me
Oh,
in 20 or 30
um,
seconds.
you know what? I'll probably have to back Morel. Like you said, fighting puncher, Cuban fighter, young fighter. Obviously, the names he's got on that record, you know, Fox, standing out, Josip Luli, whatever, those sort of names. So he's been in there with kind of guys, but again, he's only had 10 pro fights, nine of which have finished by stoppage. So I'd be surprised if that fight happens. But if it did happen, I actually wouldn't bet against David Morrell. I think David Morrell is a world-class operator. But if I'm Munguia, I'm not going anywhere near that fight, frankly.
Yeah, I don't think it's realistic fight to happen next. I think David Morrell probably be avoided for the next year, year to 18 months. But yeah, I really rate David Morrell, and I think he is up there with the top three, four, five super middleweights at the minute. So I make him a favorite against Jaime Munguia, to be quite honest with you. Even though, as you said, he has only had 10 fights, but yeah, frightening puncher, and I think that he's a real problem at 168 pounds as well. I really enjoyed that with you, mate. We were talking about what next for Jaime Munguia? How does he fare against the best at 168 pounds? Guys, you let us know your thoughts. Do you think Jaime Munguia could beat everybody? Do you think the all Mexican fight with Canelo? Would you be backing Munguia? Who knows? How does he get on against Benavidez, Plant, Morel, some of the others up at the top of the super middleweight division? Let us know your thoughts. And Elliot, appreciate your time as always, mate. Really enjoyed that one and speak to you again soon.
William Paul, and as always, guys, thank you very much for watching.